Not every show that deserved a second season got one, and the 1970s is full of them. Series that arrived with genuine ambition, real characters, and stories worth telling, then vanished after a single run like they were never there at all. These 14 forgotten shows deserved better. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's bring them back from the dead. Number 14, Con. In 1975, CBS aired a show so ahead of its time that the network seemingly had no idea what to do with it. Con. Following a Chinese-American private investigator working the streets of San Francisco's Chinatown in a television landscape where Asian leads were so rare as to be virtually non-existent, Kai Jie bringing to the title role a weathered, intelligent dignity that made every case feel personal and every scene feel grounded in a community that American television had almost entirely ignored. The show's 4 episodes demonstrating not only that an Asian American protagonist could anchor a network drama, but that the specific world of Chinatown, its politics, its generations, its tensions between tradition and assimilation, was rich enough to fuel a series for years, and the network canceled it anyway. One of the quiet injustices of a decade that talked about representation more than it practiced it. Number 13, Apple's Way. Created by Earl Hamner Jr., the same writer who gave America the Waltons, and who understood better than almost anyone in television how to tell stories about families navigating the distance between their values and the world pressing in on them. Apple's Way ran for 2 seasons between 1974 and 1975 and followed the Apple family, a Los Angeles architect who moves his wife and children back to the small Iowa town where he grew up, convinced that the pace and the community of rural life will give his family something the city cannot. The show working in the same register of quiet warmth and genuine human complexity that made the Waltons a phenomenon, Ronnie Cox bringing an earnest, thoughtful quality to the father at the center of the story, and the series finding in the friction between California modernity and Midwestern tradition a set of tensions that felt true and were endlessly generative. Canceled before it had fully found what it could become. Number 12, Hot L Baltimore. Norman Lear produced television that was always willing to go somewhere uncomfortable, and Hot L Baltimore. Airing on ABC in 1975 and based on Lanford Wilson's celebrated off-Broadway play, went somewhere that American network television had essentially never gone before, setting its ensemble of eccentric, struggling, and frequently marginal characters in a decaying Baltimore hotel, and including among them an openly gay couple at a time when homosexuality on network television was still essentially invisible. The show's willingness to present these characters with warmth and specificity rather than as punchlines or cautionary tales, making it genuinely radical for its moment. The ensemble cast bringing to their roles a quality of lived-in humanity that the show's single season barely had time to explore before ABC, apparently nervous about what it had greenlit, quietly canceled it and moved on. Number 11, Karen. The 1975 version of Karen, distinct from an earlier series of the same name, followed a young woman working for a public interest organization in Washington, D.C., navigating the political machinery of the capital while trying to actually accomplish something meaningful within it. And the show's particular achievement was its refusal to treat Karen's idealism as naivety to be corrected, presenting instead a protagonist who was genuinely competent, genuinely committed, and genuinely funny. The comedic and dramatic elements of her work life balanced with a lightness that made the show enormously watchable. The cast surrounding Karen bringing enough distinctive personality to suggest a world that extended well beyond the edges of any individual episode, and the cancellation arriving before the show had time to develop the ensemble depth that its premise clearly promised. Number 10, Beacon Hill. CBS invested significantly in Beacon Hill, the 1975 drama that was openly positioned as an American answer to Upstairs, Downstairs, the enormously successful British series about the intertwined lives of an aristocratic household and its servants, transplanting the concept to a wealthy Boston family in the years immediately following World War I and building around it an ensemble of 13 regular cast members whose storylines were designed to reflect the class tensions, social changes, and personal dramas of a society in transition. The production values high, the ambition genuine, and the result a show that despite its considerable craft never quite found the audience CBS needed it to find. the network canceling it after a single season and absorbing a financial loss significant enough that it discouraged American networks from attempting prestige ensemble drama of this scale for years afterward. Number 9. Petrocelli. Barry Newman's Tony Petrocelli is one of the great underappreciated legal protagonists of 1970s American television. A Harvard-educated lawyer who chooses to set up practice in a small southwestern town, living in a partially built house on the edge of town with his wife, while defending clients that bigger practices wouldn't touch. The show running from 1974 to 1976 and combining the legal procedural format with a genuine character study of a man who has made a deliberate choice to use his education in service of people the system routinely fails. Newman bringing an intensity and an intelligence to the role that elevated the weekly case structure into something with genuine moral weight. The Southwestern setting giving the show a visual distinctiveness that most legal dramas of the period entirely lacked, and the 2 seasons that exist representing only the beginning of what the character and the world around him were capable of. Number 8. The Family Halvok. Glenn Ford brought the full weight of a decades-long film career to The Family Halvok, a 1975 NBC drama set in the rural American South during the Great Depression and following a minister and his family navigating poverty, community, and moral complexity with the kind of quiet dignity that the period and the setting demanded. The show drawing on the same tradition of American pastoral drama as The Waltons while finding in its Depression-era setting a specific texture of hardship and resilience that gave it its own identity. Ford's performance anchoring the ensemble with an authority that made every episode feel like it carried genuine stakes. The show's cancellation after a brief run, depriving television of what might have become one of the decade's great family dramas, and leaving a body of work too small to fully represent what the series was building toward. Number 7. The Fitzpatricks. Arriving on CBS in 1977, The Fitzpatricks was a family drama set in a working-class Michigan steel town that distinguished itself from the decade's other family shows by the specificity of its economic and social setting. This was a family whose life was shaped by the rhythms of industrial labor, by the particular culture of a union town, by the pressures and solidarities of a community whose identity was inseparable from the work its people did and the show treated. All of this not as backdrop, but as the essential condition of everything its characters felt and did. The Fitzpatrick family's dynamics gaining weight and texture from the world around them in ways that more generic family dramas never managed. The ensemble cast building genuine chemistry across the single season CBS gave them before deciding the ratings weren't sufficient and moving on to something easier. Number 6. Executive Suite. Based on the 1954 film and the novel by Cameron Hawley, Executive Suite arrived on CBS in 1976 as a primetime drama set in the boardrooms and corridors of a major American corporation, following the executives, their families, and the employees beneath them through the moral compromises, power struggles, and personal crises of corporate life. The show anticipating by several years the primetime soap operatics that Dallas and Dynasty would turn into a genre-defining formula, but distinguishing itself from those later shows by a greater interest in the actual mechanics of corporate power and a more serious engagement with the ethical questions that power raises. The ensemble cast, featuring Mitchell Ryan, Ellen Corby, and a rotating roster of guest performers, giving the show a texture of genuine dramatic complexity that its single season barely scratched the surface of. Number 5. Code R. Code R arrived on CBS in 1977 as a straightforward emergency services drama following the rescue teams of a California island community responding to the accidents, disasters, and crises that the island's geography and population generated week after week. The show working in the tradition of Emergency, the NBC drama that had demonstrated convincingly that audiences would watch competent professionals doing dangerous work with skill and dedication, and bringing to that format a specific sense of community that distinguished it from more generically set procedurals. The island setting creating a closed world in which the rescuers and the rescued were neighbors. The stakes of every call carrying a personal weight that the format used effectively, and the single season that resulted, demonstrating enough of what the show could do to make its cancellation feel like an interruption rather than a conclusion. Number 4. Spencer's Pilots. Spencer's Pilots ran briefly on CBS in 1976 and followed the pilots and staff of a small charter aviation company, combining the workplace ensemble format with the inherent drama of aviation in a show that understood, as the best workplace dramas always do, that the most interesting stories come not from the work itself, but from the people doing it and the relationships between them. The charter aviation setting giving the show access to a wider variety of stories than a more geographically fixed series could manage, each flight potentially delivering the characters into a completely different situation and environment, and the ensemble the show assembled suggesting the foundation of a genuinely durable series. The network's decision to cancel after a single season, leaving a premise with real potential unexplored and an audience that had found the show without being given enough time to make it a habit. Number 3. West Side Medical. Premiering on ABC in 1977, West Side Medical followed 3 young doctors running a small medical practice in Los Angeles, 2 men and a woman. The gender balance itself a quiet statement in an era when medical dramas were overwhelmingly male, and distinguished itself from the larger hospital dramas of the period by its intimacy. The small practice setting allowing the show to develop patient relationships with a depth that the emergency room format rarely permitted. The 3 leads building a dynamic that mixed professional tension, genuine friendship, and the particular exhaustion of people who had worked hard to get somewhere and were still working hard to stay there. The show's cancellation after a single season cutting short what was becoming one of the more thoughtfully written medical dramas of the decade, and leaving its 3 central characters mid-story with nowhere left to go. Number 2. Fish. Abe Vigoda had been one of the most unexpectedly beloved elements of Barney Miller, the ABC police precinct comedy that was quietly one of the best-written shows on American television, and Fish spun his character off into a domestic comedy in 1977 that placed the perpetually exhausted, magnificently lugubrious detective Phil Fish and his wife Bernice in the unexpected situation of fostering a group of troubled children, the premise giving Vigoda a completely different comic context while preserving everything that had made the character irresistible. The contrast between Fish's magnificent world weariness and the chaotic energy of the children around him generating a warmth that the show's 2 seasons had barely begun to fully exploit before ABC canceled it. Vigoda returning to Barney Miller and leaving behind a spin-off that had demonstrated more genuine heart than most of the comedies that outlasted it. Number 1. Del Vecchio. Of all the shows on this list, Del Vecchio may be the one whose cancellation after a single season in 1976 and 1977 represents the greatest loss, because Judd Hirsch's performance as Dominic Del Vecchio, a Los Angeles police sergeant working homicide while attending law school at night, a working-class Italian-American cop with an intellectual ambition that his colleagues didn't always know what to do with, is one of the great unrecognized lead performances of 1970s American television, Hirsch bringing to the character a quality of fierce, restless intelligence combined with genuine physical and emotional groundedness that made every scene feel inhabited rather than performed. The show's exploration of the tension between Del Vecchio's loyalty to the institution he served and his growing understanding of its limitations, anticipating the more celebrated police dramas that would follow it by years, and the single season that CBS aired representing only the beginning of what Hirsch and the character were capable of, a show that deserved the career that Taxi would give its star 2 years later, and that television has never properly mourned. OUTRO, 14 shows, 14 seasons that ended too soon, and 14 reminders that the history of television is as much about what disappeared as what survived. The shows that found their audience a year too late, or never got the promotion they needed, or simply asked questions that the networks weren't ready to hear answered. If this list sent you looking for something you'd never heard of before, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we rescue forgotten television every single week, and the next one is already waiting.